Alright, so this season in the horror genre we've pretty much talked about just about anything there is. So I thought for this week we'd go back to the basics and just deal with ghosts. And these particular ghosts just happen to be terrorizing women and taking them in that direction of, are they being haunted by ghosts, or are they just totally and completely off their rockers suddenly? And it kind of exploring that little mind game that the supernatural portion of the genre can play with at times. And I want to start with Carnival of Souls. The story of a woman who decides she's gonna... Well, her friends are going to race some dudes on the street, and of course, naturally, as they're driving, racing, they go across a bridge, and the girls go off the side and possibly drown and die. Only one of them returns, and that one being our lead character, who's played by an actress named Candice Hilligoss, who is amazing in this, and is the whole driving force of the movie. She has this... I can't remember exactly what else I have seen her in off the top of my head, if anything at all. There's probably something totally major I'm just forgetting about, but what she brings to this, where there's a bit of a lovely essence about her in certain scenes, especially when they go into the more kind of romantic angle, or potential romantic angle that the story ends up going in. But then there's also the way she deals with the way she conveys the confusion of all this, of how she has no idea exactly how she got back, and whether the world that she's in is the one that she initially left from. And then there's also kind of a heartbreaking quality to this, because she plays up the fear very well, and that kind of... These all kind of start to combine after a while, the confusion and the horror and all that. But then once it gets to the moments where she gets so terrified, it does, in fact, become heartbreaking, because especially the scenes when she feels like she'd be safer if she wasn't alone, so she's practically begging this guy to stay with her just to hopefully keep this stuff away, and it actually turns into a really heartbreaking performance once we pass that line. So it really, to me, really kind of rises above and goes right up there with some of the really great all-time horror performances. And this woman is an organ player at a church in Kansas, and she just sees playing the organ as a job. As long as she gets paid, it really doesn't matter where she's playing. It just happens to be a church, no matter how much this might offend some of the people that she comes across. And yeah, we get some, straightforward foreshadowing in there, like the guy walking up to her and saying, when you play, really put your soul into it. And there's even, like, a pause for effect. And yeah, I can see it being looked at as, like, this very B horror movie, for sure. But there are so many things for starters, a technical aspect that really makes it stand out. Starting with this kind of organ score that's going on, where it's not just in the scenes where she's playing it, which obviously work quite well as well, especially when we get that massive overhead shot of the whole thing. It's like, reminds me of like shots of Frederick March in One Foot in Heaven, only even bigger, and creepier by, by every stretch of the imagination. But then there are even those moments when she's driving down the road, and she's starting to get closer to the middle of nowhere, and the organ music is all that's on the radio. Every station, at every volume, it doesn't matter. It's all organ music all the time. And it's creepy as hell, as you can probably imagine. And it never feels like it's milking it either. It's always got that constant effect of just the whole thing feels shrouded in this, just this, and that's before the director cameo keeps popping up throughout the movie to scare the holy shit out of us, and especially her. And I do like the way they kind of play with the idea of the whole mind game thing of, is this, all in her head, is she just a crazy person, or is she actually being haunted? Like, there's stuff like how she does kind of seem off throughout it, the way the guy talks about how, you would think if she just cheated death, she'd be all humble and shit. But it's like, she just kind of seems really... there's something off about this person. They just kind of dismiss it as like, oh, that's just her. But we kind of sense, even though we really never got a vibe of her at all before she went over the bridge, she just sat in the passenger seat silently. So we, the audience, have nothing to go on in regards to how much she's changed. But considering the way the townspeople talk about it, I think we're supposed to assume, even though she's hiding this terror and the tension is amping up, she more or less just kind of went through life in kind of this quiet way. That's more or less the vibe we got in the car, where the girls were all amped up about racing the dudes, and she was just kind of silently, kind of, you know, cautious to herself, but not really saying anything. I guess we can take that for pretty much what she was like. Weird how she got two rambunctious friends. I wonder how they met. Probably, I assume, like, school friends. I think they're supposed to be quite young. In the 60s, it was kind of hard to tell, because, like, teenagers look like fucking 30-year-olds, just in general, not just in casting in movies. So, it's hard to say, but I think we're supposed to assume they're a somewhat younger bunch. And going on these visuals, there's also the stuff where, you can hear the director talk about this on this Criterion DVD, where he talks about, basically he got the idea from the movie, pretty much exactly as we see it play out in the movie, just driving down the road, and he saw that carnival looking place, but it was like a silhouette on like a blank background, and it just looked totally abandoned. And he was just like, wow, that really creeps me out. And he actually went and investigated, and he kind of got the screenwriter, John Clifford I think is his name, and they kind of just put this story together. And you can see that in the movie, how you can see how this idea was formed and the way it actually plays out on the screen. And the way they also kind of do I don't know if this was like intentional foreshadowing or what it was, but when she sees the man's face, who, as I said, is actually the director, Herc Harvey, with just cheap face paint on, it's still very effective, weirdly enough, just kind of appear in the window, and kind of before and after that, we get shots of her, and her reflection in the other window kind of has that same ghostly look to it. So I've always kind of wondered if that was kind of intentional. I mean, it's blatantly clear and obvious, even if it's not the case, that you could clearly take it in that direction. But as a visual, it still very much works, especially in the context. Now, I do understand that a big criticism in regards to this movie is the pacing, even though it's 1 hour and 18 minutes long. There's also a director's cut on here that actually has kind of a much better flow, which is 1 hour 23. He actually added 5 minutes, but still managed to make it flow much nicer, because the way he inserted new stuff in the director's cut, it's kind of like, it feels like we cut to the chase just a little quicker, because there are moments where, like, there are long moments in the original cut to where we're just kind of waiting to get to the next scare or the next anything, and they spend a lot of time on the dude she meets, John. But I believe he kind of added scenes that kind of added a few more moments of tension or scares before we get to, instead of it just all being kind of one gap here where we're waiting to get to the next one far away. So that was really well handled, and definitely makes the pace go much better than the 78-minute version. And yeah, it does kind of, it almost does makes it feel like it kind of goes off the rails with the John story, because there's really not a whole lot that adds, except possibly giving her a love interest. There's a couple of scenes later where it's certainly effective, like the mirror scene, but for the most part, it's like, you kind of think they're going to do something, like this is going to lead to something kind of big, because we spend so much time with this character, but not really. Not really. He kind of just isn't there after a while. So, I do understand where that criticism comes from, for sure, but I would really like to talk about the many ways this movie approaches fear in its very short runtime. Starting with, it does kind of do, it has like an old-fashioned nightmarish kind of feel, that whole idea where, the kind of Twilight Zone-esque thing where it's like she's in an abandoned town, and like, sometimes nobody's there at all, and then sometimes the people are there, but when they are, they can't see her or hear her, and it's just this very, and yeah, they do go into this with the whole, dream sequence thing, which is also really well done, where it's like, I think I read somewhere that people like Lynch were inspired by it, and Harvey himself was inspired by Bergman and others, and like Cocteau. And you can really see that with the way this dream sequence really plays up. Like before it's even revealed that it's a dream sequence, you know that it is, because things start really amping up, and there's no cohesion between the scenes. She's just in one place, then she's in another, and then she's in another, and it's all very disorienting and confusing. And it's like, once you realize rather quickly that it is a dream sequence, then you can just bask in just how much it goes for the weird and the really off-kilter and out of place, and it really, really reaches that effect and really hits hard. It just gives the whole thing this really eerie quality where you don't really have any idea. Once you're past the bounds of reality, you don't really know what's around the next corner, and this movie plays with that so well. And talking about that also, the ghosts themselves, particularly the Herc Harvey guy, dude. I understand if this movie, it's kind of amazing to me that this movie managed the following that it did, because there are so many people that would look at this movie's approach and probably just laugh it off. The ghosts in this movie are very clearly just extras with cheap face paint on. Just white paint and the black around the eyes, and that's it. And they just lurch around or they dance. But it's just so fucking creepy. And it's the thing where, when I first saw this, I remember I wasn't really... I guess I just wasn't expecting something like that, and there's just something really jarring. The way they can do the expressions, too, really, really sells it. And the thing about it, this is another thing, I was talking about this with Eyes Without a Face, where the black and white really comes into play, and it's like, if you were to see this in color, it just would not work. I think there is, like, a computer-colored version. I don't even know that I would want to see that. There's no possible way it has the same effect with the way the faces look and the terror that brings out just by seeing them. They don't have to do anything. They just have to be standing there and just kind of looking at you. And just their appearance in general is very jarring and, I guess, eerie. Eerie is really the word I want to keep throwing around here. And that definitely does it. And the thing here is the way they play this up, where sometimes we don't even necessarily have to see them. There's the moment when, the scene where she's at the drinking fountain and she's startled by the dude, and we don't see from up here, and then when she runs away and then turns back around after she finds another dude, we realize it's just a normal guy. But the question is, we didn't pan up. It's like, I wonder if she saw the man, or if it was just him and it startled her in the wrong way. And then the way this scene kind of goes in this really kind of obtuse way, where it's like, the camera is on her and the other guy, and it's normal. But then when we cut back to the old dude explaining, oh, I didn't mean to scare her and stuff like that, he's speaking directly to the camera. And when we cut back to her, it's not the same way, and it really kind of gives this unbalanced vibe that really adds to the whole uncertainty and confusion of everything, and the whole kind of nightmarish way this is all playing out. So I always thought that scene was really well done in that sense. Without, like I said, the thing you can really praise is just how the practically no budget they did this on, and the way they were able to create those things to where these are things that do not cost money at all, and you can make these effective scenes like this just by the choices you make with what you have. And it really takes that to pretty much the greatest possible effect they could have achieved with what they had. But then there is this, continue the stuff with the man that keeps showing back up, and that's not even to throw out that there's a ton of them, but even just this guy, Herc Harvey's playing by himself, is kind of like the main dude that's really dragging her down into this world. And there are moments that are just really... There's some moments when it's like... Some of the creepier aspects are like when he's there, but she doesn't even see him or know that he's there. Like when we get that shot of him just laying underwater, and she's like just looking somewhere else entirely. But then there's the stuff like the mirror scene, when they play with expectations to where her whole thing is, John, stay with me, I don't want to be alone. And she has a whole big scene like that, and then John's like, okay, whatever. And so, and we're obviously questioning her sanity by this point. And so this is it. We think we're safe now, because she's not alone. So there can't possibly be any scares in this scene because John's here. So he goes over to kiss her, And when she looks in the mirror, it is not him that's kissing her, it's the fucking white-faced dude. And I really love the way it really goes, and that's like, because usually he's like also from a distance. Like, it's not just that we don't expect him to be there because she's not alone. We either see him from like downstairs or out a window or something else. He's never been this fucking close either. So it's just a really unexpected moment at a really great time. And talking about the timing, there's also the moment when, it's one that they've already alluded to, when he spins around in the psychiatrist chair. And the thing about it is they do play, it's very expected when it happens. Unlike the mirror scene, this moment's very expected, but it's the way they play it. Because we had that scene at the beginning when we just focus on the back of the psychiatrist's chair, and she's speaking, he's not speaking back, and all we see is the back of the chair. But then he turns around and he just kind of blatantly says, sorry about having my back to you, I had to write something down. It's like, oh, okay, they're totally not going to use that later. So yeah, there's the scene where she's talking to him, the chair is facing the other way, and just as we suspect, chair turns around, it's white-faced dude. But the way he just kind of has that smile that happens at the very last minute before it cuts away, which is really creepy. But there's also the moment the way we see him a little before she does. So there's just a really long moment of silence when he turns around and she sees him. And then there's that delayed reaction before she screams. And I like the way they kind of really make us bask in the moment. Like, we're not really... There's no immediate reaction, and that's what makes the creepiness kind of build just a little more before she screams and runs away, and we get the creepy smile. So I thought that just all the scares in this movie are so masterfully done, and like I said, given that this is pretty much all they had to work with, it all just really comes together in a great way. And that's the thing is, this apparently started with, it was a double feature with The Devil's Messenger, which was a Lon Chaney Jr. movie. And you can find The Devil's Messenger in those like big packs of like 50 movies that they just kind of throw in there. Mostly public domain movies. And then, and The Devil's Messenger is this movie that is just so... It's just one of those movies. Like, I've seen it, but I can't remember a damn thing about it because it blends in with all these other movies. Those movies that you see on, like, public access, where people just play them whenever, especially around this season. But it's like, nobody remembers them, and they're cheap, they're not effective at all, they're cheesy, whatever. And this was the second movie. This was the movie after The Devil's Messenger. And that's the thing, too, is it really blew my mind when I watched this, because another way I was talking about how unexpected the whole thing was that this is also in those packs. Only it looks like obviously here with the Criterion release, it's really nice and crisp looking, and the black and white it just looks really, really nice and artistic. But when you watch it in this copy, like most copies of this, it's like those really cheap copies where it's got bad sound and the picture looks like you're watching it through a glass of milk, practically. And I remember watching it and being super creeped out by it. This was a good decade ago. And I was like, wow, this is a lot creepier and more effective than the rest of the stuff that's in here. It's like, how does this stick out? And it's like, when I saw that it was getting a Criterion release, it was like, number one, I fucking celebrated and got it immediately. And secondly, it was like, I was so happy because it was like, oh, so this does in fact have a following. Because after it had that release with The Devil's Messenger, people, like the critics, didn't care for it. They thought it was okay. But then in the 80s, it just had this massive resurrection. And people really started to take to it and really kind of give it this... It got this cult following. And then finally, when the Criterion release comes around, by this point, it's like, well, yeah, it's about fucking time. So I really, really love... This was a really inspired choice for them to go for, and I'm so happy that they did. And they really put a lot of effort into it, too. I wasn't expecting something so thick, which is amazing. And of course, adding the director's cut to it as well. And yeah, there's still stuff in there, like... the director's cut fixes this a little bit. It still starts, even though it looks nice and crisp now, It still has that start where it feels like it's right before they start racing with the guys is the start of the movie, and it feels and there's like a cut in mid dialogue there when it starts, and it's like I feel like the movie's I feel like this isn't the completed print. I feel like the actual beginning of this movie was cut off, and this is what the remaining footage starts at because it's my understanding, her Harvey and them actually lost like a reel where it had like a scene where like when we see where the other ones come from, where they like rise from the ground or something. So that would have been cool, and I guess it was a shot he was really proud of, but I guess like the reel's lost. But the thing here is, and yeah, like I was talking about in the director's cut, there is kind of a more like we kind of go into that scene, like it kind of fades in instead of just an abrupt cut, like we're in mid scene. So. They did really fix it up nicely, and I'm so glad that to watch this now I don't have to watch that shitty copy that's in like a paper envelope in a case of like 20 other movies. So, yes, yes, this makes me very happy. It's definitely one of my favorites for this season around this time, and yes, it's all horror, cheap gloriousness, so much more effective than a lot of the movies with like 80 times the budget. So really, really just a masterclass in horror movie making, so yes. Now going on The Innocents, which was the year prior, actually. When The Innocents was released, they would have been making Carnival of Souls. And this is obviously based on the novel Turn of the Screw, the Henry James novel, which was also made into the stage play by William Archibald, I think. And he's also one of the screenwriters adapting it. His co-writer? Truman Capote. Of all people, yeah. And apparently there was additional dialogue from John Mortimer, who has like a really, really long career, and not even just in writing, but as far as screenwriting and movies go, one of his standout scripts is, with him and his wife, I believe, is Bunny Lake is Missing, which is also really good and really eerie. Actually, I have that here for a reference, where it also kind of fits in with this whole toying with are we losing our minds or is what's going on actually going on. That's really good stuff, too. And here, we start off and we kind of immediately get the eerie vibes from this. This is obviously going in the really gothic territory, the kind of period design territory that we really get to... This genre likes to play with a lot and has a lot of effective movies in, and stories in general, where we have the start where the song Oh Willow Waly is playing over the credits. A little girl is singing it, and it plays for a while there like an overture, just over a black screen before we even get the 20th Century Fox logo. And that's just a really great way to kind of pull us into this kind of subtly eerie territory before it gets there. It's subtle for a long time, but then it starts to go. And our story, obviously, is Deborah Kerr, or Carr, whatever you want to say, shows up at this house to be the governess for these two children, Flora and Miles. And she's being interviewed by Michael Redgrave of the famous Redgrave family. And the thing here is, it's like, oh, well, this should be a good job. This will be fine. I'm hearing good things about the kids. This guy seems good. He's their uncle, and it's all great. And she's like, so what happened to the, this very last minute, like very tacked on. It's like, so what happened to the other governess? And it's like, oh, she died. Don't talk about this before, though. It's a sore subject. On your way. And... and she goes on that, but it's like, oh, that's kind of eerie, that sucks, but, you know, okay, nothing too mysterious here, somebody died, that happens. So she goes, and Miles is away at school, so she gets to befriend Flora for a while. But then eventually Miles shows up through very mysterious circumstances. And the thing about this title, when you look at these children and how innocent they play it up indeed, it's very much like the whole innocent vibe they give off is where a lot of the horror stems from. Where this is one of those horror movies where children can be super, super creepy by just being themselves. Like, maybe they know it, maybe they don't, but they're even just behaving like children. There's just something, like if it's in the right context, or if it's shot in the right way, or it gives off a certain, like it's alluding to something. then suddenly something that looks very innocent on the surface can be very, very creepy without even trying, without having to do the whole look how creepy I am thing. It's just literally kids being kids, but because of the context or what have you, it's all very nerve jangling, I guess you would say. So there's moments like there, for a while it's very low key. There's stuff like when Flora says, Miles is coming, and it's like, well, no, he's not. He's at school. But then it's like, yeah, kids just say stuff like that. It's like, you just say something and it's like, that's just not true. Are you just talking to hear your own voice? And sure enough, the next day, like I said, through very mysterious circumstances, Miles is on his way home, as if Flora knew this. And this goes on as well when there's these moments with Flora before Miles even gets there. The stuff like when she's just casually, much like an innocent child would, is watching a spider attack a butterfly. It's weird to see a child take glee in this, but nevertheless, it's a child watching nature. You don't really think much of this, but the way that shot is from down here, seeing her this way, just really gives it this unnerving angle. Like there's something more to this. There's something that's not right about this, and then it goes on. And before we have much of a ghost vibe at all, there's just that tiny little line in there when Flora's talking about, she's doing the "if I should die before I wake" prayer, and then she says, like, what happens if, God decides to take my soul? Am I gonna go to heaven, or do I just does he leave me here to walk around? Because that happens. It's like, okay, Flora, what gives you this idea? Is there shit that you're seeing? But once again, it's just a child. Children say shit. Just let them have it. Just go to bed and shut up. But yeah, and then it's this for a while until things start to really go off. And so we get to the stuff that's like the shit that's gonna make us afraid of windows and shit. Like, yeah, in this scene we have like Miles and Flora laughing while they're playing a music box. Creepy, but they're under the impression they're playing hide and seek. So they're having fun. They just happen to have a creepy music box with them. Back then, that was normal. So, but then we get to the stuff when her decides that she's going to play hide and seek with them before bed. It's like, why not? So she goes in to hide behind a curtain, and nevertheless, the face of a dude named Peter Quint appears next to her. And you can kind of see his silhouette back there, like he's kind of waiting in the wings. I don't know if that's the actor waiting for his cue, or if it's the ghost waiting, but it could be either. Either one, it's still effective. And we just kind of watch him glide. Like, it's not like he walks up, it's like he fucking glides up to the window. And like I said, that's the shit that keeps you away from windows at night for like months after you've seen this. And they don't really play it up in any other ways. There's no, big whole deal about this. There's no big score and all that. If there is, it goes right in with the scene to the point that it doesn't, make a spectacle of itself. And that's just very unsettling. But then there's another ghost reveal later, because there's obviously another one here, the woman, and it's like we see her from a distance across the lake. And it's like, you think about it, and you're like, how is it that this is creepier? Because the thing is that this is nighttime, and the ghost is right here in the window. And yet somehow it's like 10 times creepier when the ghost is at a distance in broad daylight. And she's even saying that. It's like, I saw this in broad daylight. That's unnatural. It's like, the shit comes out at night. Okay, I get it. But this was broad daylight. This was the middle of the day. This is when we're supposed to be safe. And there's this creepy fucking ghost right across the pond, just watching us. Across the lake, just watching us. And then later on, Flora's big meltdown. Pamela Franklin, obviously, is an amazing actress. You can also see this in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, especially when she got a little older. Just an amazing actress. And here, she just has this really big breakdown scene in the rain when she's like, she's under the impression she's going insane now, so she's begging the kids to say, you see the shit too, right? Like, tell me you see this. And it's just this really kind of horrifying, but once again, also heartbreaking scene, the way they combine this, with her just weeping, and it's just all very, very effective and very scary, but also there's a number of emotions that they play with here, and there's the whole, with the way they set up the whole, is she just insane, or is this really what she's seeing or nothing? And the way they play with that through the whole movie, where they're so long before we get a confirmation on does anybody else see this or not. And they really amp that up well, especially with just the other things around there, like I was talking about the way everything looks for, like, the production design, everything looks really, like, but then, like, the way they use shadows, too, where the way, it's almost like the house has an odd shape to it, with the way everything has, like, this really kind of, I'm struggling to find my words here, the way the shadows kind of unnaturally hit the wall, just gives it this really, like, something, much like it is, right out of a kind of horror thriller story. Like I said, the whole period setting also just kind of has its own ghostly way about it, I guess, because it gives you the idea of long, long ago. So just the whole setting in general kind of makes it feel like the whole setting is almost ghostly in itself, and the interior of the house really plays that up also. Not just the use of shadows, but the use of reflections too. Much like I was talking about in Carnival of Souls with the car. There's the moment I really like when we have the scene that kind of mirrors the scene where Quint's in the window, and it's like right after that when she goes out to investigate, we see, it's pretty much the exact same reveal, only from the other side, but it's the reflection of the maid. So I kind of like how that kind of mirrors what we just saw in a much creepier context. And then just the stuff where they just start going all out, like the stuff with Miles. Miles, easily one of the most unsettling child characters in horror movie history. And then, like there's one moment when even, like, after a while, like, it becomes clear he seems like a lot more unsettling than Flora does, for sure. Much more unnatural. Like, there's the scene when he's saying the poem that just really gives us an uneasy vibe about him. But then there is the kiss scene, which is something that's, like, that's a discomfort that's so uncomfortable that you're not going to see it in today's movies, that's for sure. But then there's stuff like when Flora's looking down in the garden and she's like, there's someone in the garden, and she looks and it's Miles. And it's like, well, that's weird. You'd think Flora would have known Miles when she sees him. And it's just kind of this weird, eerie little connotation of, it's like she sees Miles as a stranger because he's just getting that much more on the weird side, for a lack of a better way to put it. So what his character adds really takes this to, like I said, just the whole layout of the house. It's just like, there's like always the threat of like a haunt anywhere. Like I said, sometimes you might see a shadow and you think you're seeing something else, and it really kind of plays up that paranoia for the audience just as much as it does the lead character of, are we seeing something or are we not, which is really well done. And like I said, the way it just, you know, constantly plays up that aspect of maybe she's actually crazy, and the way they kind of give us an answer, but they kind of don't too. And it's like we're kind of just left somewhere in the middle here. Where it's like, and I like the fact that they play up that, that before she sees them as ghosts, she has seen them before in pictures. So there's little things in there to where it's like, we could easily explain that she's just seeing shit, that she's crazy now. Or that she's been driven crazy by something. And it just really gives this whole nice, you know, classic horror vibe about it. Like, classic kind of haunted house movie without, you know, the usual, you know, cliches and all that. And are just really using that atmosphere as far as they can possibly take it. And has a lot of stuff like, it's very easily comparable to Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, I think, which is another amazing movie that really likes to play head games with its characters. But that one doesn't have the, like, I thought about, like, you could actually do this with Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte and The Innocents, but I did want to kind of keep up the supernatural vibe here, and also, another reason was, this video actually didn't start with, what can I talk about along with The Innocents? To me, it was Carnival of Souls is like the big dog here. It was, what am I going to do with Carnival of Souls? And that's how The Innocents got here. So, so needless to say, yeah, I will take Carnival of Souls, absolutely. They do handle the material in very different ways, for sure. The Innocence is much more subtle, definitely. But I love Carnival of Souls' ideas, and the way they were able to just the construction of the scares is just really kind of unprecedented in a lot of movies, and the fact that they had such a tiny budget really says something, and the fact that they were able to do it in such a short run time as well, just everything. And it just absolutely feels like one of those movies that's just so, even though it's got the nice big Criterion release now, it still feels like one of those small movies that's just kind of lingering out there, that'll just kind of sneak up and haunt a moviegoer should they come across it. But yes, obviously The Innocence is great as well. It was actually, I only saw it for the first time a few years ago. A very enthusiastic friend, recommended it to me, who is, her favorite book, I believe, is The Turn of the Screw. So that speaks for the adaptation. So, but yeah, for me it's Carnival of Souls all day. But The Innocence is definitely, if you like that kind of more subtle and kind of old-fashioned without the hokiness, then The Innocence is definitely what you want to go for. But yeah, for me it's definitely this. So we have one more to go. It's going to be as I mentioned before, it's going to be a series. It's going to be a series of 4, just one after the other. So, and decide which one is the best of that series, and that's what we're going to end on. And it's pretty much, I believe, one of the only things in the horror genre of the different aspects of it that we haven't covered yet in the past month. So I guess you can look forward to that. And yeah, the review videos are going to start getting big and frequent. So yes, so until all this plays out,